I'm just going to sit here and silently wave for a while at everybody. All right. Let's let everybody pile in. I hope everyone's having a good day. If you are here and you can see the chat on your screen, I would love for you to just give me a quick hello. I'm going to type in here and say hello. Hopefully that triggers you to be able to see it. And let me know you can hear me. So we're going to get started here in just a couple moments. Yo, loud and clear. Thank you, Patrick. And hello, Veronica. Thank you for joining. Eric, how's it going? Good to be heard and thankfully seen. My camera was very squished a moment ago, but apparently it's resolved itself. So here we are. All right, we're just about a minute past the top of the hour here. It is 11 a.m. Pacific time. I'm based on the West Coast, so that is my frame of reference. But for all of you joining, I just want to say thank you. Sessions like this are really important to us in the community. They are moments for us all to learn from other practitioners in the community. And we're really thankful to have the participants from today. And I'm going to bring them on stage in just a moment. But I just wanted to sort of like do a couple little level setting things, housekeeping items, sort of the status quo. You've probably been to webinars with us and many other webinars in your career. So not too much of a change, but welcome to this session. I'm the CEO and founder of marketingops.com. As I mentioned, we like to host regular meetups, workshops, and events, both online and in person, to help sort of educate you on the art of the possible. The goal being, of course, that you all eventually get to step into roles where you can lead a go-to-market tech stack and help guide your organization in leveraging the power of technology to achieve their business outcomes. And today's session is going to be very interesting, right? It's talking a bit about the idea of attribution, measuring things that are usually harder to measure. And so I'm going to bring on our two guests in just a moment to dive into all of that topic. But while you're here, please make sure you use that chat to go ahead and post some questions, thoughts, comments, reactions. I'll be here in the background to kind of moderate and manage those things. And then just, of course, as usual, this recording is happening and it'll be available to all of you afterwards. So we'll go ahead and send that out. So if you didn't make it live, it'll be available to you as well. So I'm going to stop blabbering because now we're 3 minutes past, and I'm going to take our fun audio clip off and bring our two guests on stage. So I would love to welcome Francisco and Wesa. Hey, both of you, welcome to the stage. We're here. Thank you. I'm going to pass it over to the two of you. If you don't mind, please just go ahead and introduce yourself, and then I'll take myself off of stage here, and I'll bring your presentation up right after sort of you're done with the introductions. But thank you both for taking the time with us today. I really appreciate it. And for all of you else in the audience, I'll see you on the other side.
Thank you, Mike. Wesa, please feel free to go first.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. My name is Wesa. I'm on the marketing operations team at Glean. And I'm really excited to talk with you about some of the things that we've learned, both in being able to do some out-of-home campaigns, as well as what we were able to see with revsure. So, Francisco, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. Thank you for spending a little bit of your day with us. I am Francisco. I lead solutions engineering at revsure, which means I spend every day with wonderful customers like Wesa to help them answer questions with their data, questions that have impact, and questions that surround ROI, revenue, and pipeline. All right, so let's get started. Measuring the unmeasurable. And right, so what we'll cover today is a quick intro into revsure and how this partnership came together, how revsure works as a system, the challenge, right, that we help surface, that we help address, and the rollout. How is Wesa how we set it up, how we rolled it out, and how is Wesa continuing to use this day in and day out. With so how does revsure work, right? So this is just to give you insight, and everything starts with collection, right? Collecting all of the data sources from UTM, first party data, the CRM, your marketing automation platform, your warehouse, ad channels, everything that comes together, right? And the part that most tools miss, one is creating that story together, and then even the anonymous activity, right? Not just who's known, but before they're known, what are they doing, right? And part of what we will tackle today, part of what we'll give insight to today is that person who saw your billboard, aka out of home, and visited your site 3 weeks later without filling out a form, that person still exists. And that person is still tied to all of the efforts that you're doing, right? So that's kind of the data collection piece, the modeling piece. So for digital paths, we run causal attribution, not just fixed roles, right? Because nobody decided in a settings menu that a webinar is a certain percentage of a deal, right? And this can kind of surface with everything that you do. And having the ability to do pre and post analyses to differentiate them and to see the impact, right? So it's not about forcing a model or forcing a certain thing, but doing an analysis that really captures and really models with the rules that we have. Third is the insight layer. So real-time dashboards, funnel conversion paths, predictive analytics, and next best actions recommendations. This is where a data science exercise becomes something a demand gen manager can open and can use, right? It's bringing together all of these things so that at a moment's notice, you understand what's happening and you can action on it, right? Which leads to the actionable output piece. So everything syncs back to your CRM, everything syncs back to your map, and the platform, meaning revsure, surfaces what are the campaigns that are undercredited today and helps you understand how to best move forward. So that's just kind of some of the insight. And here I'm going to have Wesa give more insight as to why Glean partnered with revsure and the honor that it's been, at least for me, for working with Wesa almost the past 2 years.
Thanks, Francisco. That's very kind of you. So I think just to set some context here, initially when we were evaluating tools, and revsure was kind of on the short list of that, we were really looking at, how do we measure multi-touch attribution for the campaigns that we can typically in Salesforce or Marketo? How do we kind of expand that to look not just at first touch, but maybe at pipeline influence or pipeline acceleration, kind of softer metrics like that. And I think, as we dug deeper into the Redcare platform, we realized, oh, this is actually, there's a ton of different, dashboards or reports or widgets that we could use that were more, grounded in statistics and thinking about, how has your conversion lift been impacted because you've, invested in a ton of different channels, or how has something looked pre and post. And so, at that point, when we were starting to pilot our brand and out of home campaign in specific cities, we were thinking about how we could actually leverage revsure in order to help us measure something that typically, isn't measured it quite in the same way, or isn't able to be quantified as concretely as we were able to do it here. And so because we were kind of able to pull all of those kind of pieces together, both educating our marketing team, marketing leadership, finance team members, we're able to kind of set the ground for, this is what we're going to spend, this is what the campaign is going to look like, and this is the type of impact or type of metrics that we're going to look at to see whether or not something like this was successful. So through that, partnered really closely with the revsure team on, both pulling the data together and looking at all of the different ways that we were spending and all of the different channels that we were using for out of home, looking into, data deep dives, pulling in all of that together, making sure that we're using the platform correctly and interpreting those, calculations and statistical analyses correctly. So we were able to kind of go back to our leadership team, as you'll see in a couple slides, to kind of measure the impact of these campaigns.
Thank you, Wesa. Absolutely. And this is just to kind of revsure at Glean, right? And it's just to kind of give you an idea. So we've talked about everything that we stitch together, right? From the web visitors to historical leads and contacts to accounts to opportunities, right? And how this one graph can be used across the multiple channels that you want to measure, the multiple channels that you want to see the ROI of, and the multiple channels that you want to use as levers to understand what is working and what is not working, right? And the 3 use cases live at Glean, there are many more. Ways and I work on different business case questions, but just highlighting these 3, from field marketing to LinkedIn effectiveness to what we're speaking of today, out of home campaigns. So one data graph across every system, right? So we're stitching together all those signals coming in together to give us all those data layers and all that information that really feeds, right? And everything that Wesa just described and everything that she gave insight into why it's possible, right, is because how all of this comes together, right? And having that visibility of the full funnel. So think about it as the context there that every team needs, right? From marketing to sales to finance, all of this comes together. So the conversation is a mutual conversation. But the hardest part is the identity, right? So the same buyer that shows up as an anonymous visitor in March, or a webinar registrant on their personal email, or a contact on an open opportunity, how do we take all that together, right? And without stitching that together, without placing all of those different touch points, then we're missing out on that pipeline. We're missing out on that visibility that drives the conversation, right? So on the slide left to right, we see your CRM, your marketing automation platform, ads, product, and warehouse, right? And how they resolve into a single paragraph in the middle. And that full context, full funnel is identities, signals, metrics, and outcomes. And all of this coming together, right? And how it feeds and how it can be used into revsure is AI attribution, projections, marketing mix modeling, AI agents, and the conversation of today, pre and post analyses to see the impact of out-of-home billboard campaigns. So, Wesa, can you give us insight as to the challenge? And I know you kind of spoke a little bit about it, but just help us unearth and unpack that together.
Yeah. So again, a little bit of context for folks. At Glean, we are always looking at the data to kind of think about what our next move should be. And brand and out of home spend is notoriously really, really hard to measure. And so we had done some flavors of, proving a branding kind of play would work in our industry. So we had done a lot of, paid search and brand specific ads, some more brand focused ads on paid social, just so we could kind of get the data and, spark that initial conversation of, hey, we're putting all of this, brand material out there and it's actually resonating. And so therefore, from a digital perspective, we're able to see that kind of move things along a lot quicker, and kind of goes back to what Francisco was saying of, measuring this multi-channel. We're not just looking at it, with different channels. We're looking at, for example, paid social, how that impacts kind of the performance of the rest of our channels and things like that through the revsure platform. So kind of getting that initial proof point to say, okay, we think that this is something that we could invest in. How do we set up and structure a IRL live, test that we could do? So we ended up focusing on 3 specific cities to start, and we did what we called it a city swarm. So it was like a whole city takeover for, a 3 to 5 week period, depending on the city. So everything from, commuting highway billboards to bus ads to, transit, weight center, digital ads and things like that. Kind of a whole cohesive takeover to kind of really put all of our chips in essentially, and see what that would give us. And I think, from we all have seen, the articles or kind of the analyst reports that say, there's obviously a correlation with brand spend and your company performance, but the way that you draw the line between those two things is a little bit gray. And so, how are we going to structure the measurement, and how are we going to set the expectation with our leadership that, this is what we're going to measure? This is probably what it's going to look like to start with. And to be honest, to start with, it didn't look great. If you're measuring the impact of your billboards a week after it ran, you're probably not going to see very much. But I mean, obviously, depending on the industry and the people that you're selling to. But for us, we're B2B SaaS. We're not going to see very much a week after. So it was a continual, month after month after month. Kind of checking back on the dashboard to see, okay, now do we see a lift? Do we see, any differences between a before and after? Do we see any differences between, a regional baseline versus the city baseline? And kind of structuring it that way and constantly reporting out. And I think, after a certain period of time, after a much longer period of time, actually, than I think any of us had thought, we started seeing statistical lift. So basically, using the revsure platform, not only are we seeing a difference in before and after and a difference in the pre and post, but that difference was actually correlated strongly with the money that we had spent in out of home. And so, that was a really good way for us to not just say, okay, we're going to look at before and after, we're going to look at performance in a certain region, whatever it is. We're actually drawing it back to, okay, this was actually, strongly correlated to our campaign there.
Great, and that's a lot of insight to unpack. And even I, who have heard this story, I just smile every time I hear it, just because of the impact that it made for you, Wesa, and the impact that it made at Glean, right? But the proof is in the pudding, and the proof is in the methodology, right? So differences. So this kind of sounds like a stat score. It kind of sounds like I am saying very fanciful and rhyming thing, but it can boil down to kind of 4 moves, right? And we already understand one of them. And one of them is kind of think about it as like a clinical trial, right? So some regions get the treatment and the rest do not, and you compare. So how does that look like? How do we go about this methodology? So we set the baseline, right? That's move 1. So before a single billboard goes up, measure leads, pipeline, and opportunities by that region, right? Because we need to know what normal looks like. We need to know what that foundation looks like, because normal is what you will compare against. Move 2, run the campaign, but only in selected metros, right? As Wesa mentioned, these were city storms, and there were city storms in specific cities, right? So the cities become what we're analyzing, and everywhere else, right? The differences, everywhere else in the US becomes the control group. This is the move that sometimes people will skip, and they launch everywhere at once, and there's nothing left to compare against, right? Because we need to see the before and after, and we need to see what happens when treatment happens in one place, but it doesn't happen in the other. And I think this is the single biggest key point that Wesa brought up, is that it's time, right? Brand doesn't convert on click timelines. Nobody sees a billboard and signs a contract that afternoon. I mean, maybe it can happen once in a blue moon, right? If that was the reality of marketing and running billboards, that wouldn't that be the day? That'd be a wonderful day. So you widen the window, right? And you check it monthly. And in Glean's case, and Wesa pointed this out, right? It kind of took a time frame, and it took a time frame maybe longer than initially thought. But when you see, right, that move forward, right, measuring the difference, so testing the metros against control, and the standard matters, not directional. Not only because in the way you set this up, right, it's not only a trend question, it's a statistically significant lift question, right? That's the key difference is not only are you seeing a trend, but you're seeing that the actions that you took had a statistically significant difference because of that city storm campaign, because of that out of home campaign, right? And this is how kind of to visualize, because I myself, I'm a very visual person, right? So the control of the rest of the US, right, against the test metros, helping us see that lift, right? And then being able to take that lift to your C suite.
And I think just jumping off of that and maybe to address some of the questions in the chat, if we go back one slide, we're not just looking at before and after in the specific metros. I mean, we are. So we're looking at before and after in those specific metros over a long period of time. So then, from that perspective, you're able to take into account seasonality. Maybe, you're ramping up your sales team and, there's been changes and they've been becoming more efficient or whatever that is. You're taking that into account by comparing it to a broader control. So like in this example would be the rest of the US. So looking at everything in the broader region as a whole and comparing those differences across the pre and post time period can give you a better sense of, okay, was it because we were ramping up generally, or was it because something special happened to these regions? And because we're then finally layering in the spend that we're doing in those regions specifically, we're able to start running that correlation. This this group had the variable treatment, which was the spend, and then this other group didn't.
Great. Absolutely great insight, Wayson. Thank you so much for adding that. And I know at parts you've hinted at this, but just kind of understanding the rollout, right? From the analysis that you did to interpreting it to taking it to your C-suite, and then what's the difference that made in the future of running out of home campaigns?
Yeah. So we had talked a lot about being able to unify all of the data in one place. I think it was key for us to establish that measurement baseline of setting up that multi-touch attribution foundation to begin with, so that then we could layer on top. Okay, now we're thinking about out of home campaigns. How does that layer in to the rest of the data that we're seeing? Something that I think I only touched upon that I'd love to dig into a little bit more is defining our metrics. We defined both, obviously, our pipeline metrics. This is like first touch, influence, all of that, what that means. And we did a same sort of exercise for brand metrics. And this was, a deck that we had gone to our marketing team with, our marketing leadership with, and everybody had agreed, okay, this is how we want to measure brand metrics. And that was taken both from an internal perspective of what we thought actually made sense, what we've been asked to measure that actually doesn't make sense, and why that doesn't make sense. Some industry points of view of analyst presentations and industry blogs and things like that talk about what is important to measure in brand spend versus what isn't, and then actually talking to peers in our industry, so other marketing leaders, other finance leaders specifically, and thinking about how they're trying to justify it with their teams. All of those proof points together, I think, had created, again, a solid foundation for us to kind of move forward. And every time one of us obviously is going to deviate and say, oh, well, why can't we measure ROI on a billboard? Okay, well, actually, if we go back to our metrics definitions deck, this is why that's actually not what we're supposed to be doing here, and this is why. So we always had something to look back to, always kind of set that foundation there. And then, like we mentioned, running that difference in difference, both looking at a pre and post for those specific regions, pre and post versus the rest of the US, and layering on that spend that we had applied to those different cities. And that kind of took us through, running the lift analyses, looking at what we defined as the control and comparing it against, all those different angles that I just mentioned. And then lastly, we ended up taking this to our marketing leadership team, and started, being able to justify our next set of out of home and brand campaign spends. These were both, brand campaigns that were going to be IRL, different, taking over different cities over the next couple of months, and digital brand spend. So something that you could maybe measure, a click to your website could then turn into a conversion kind of thing.
Thank you. That's thing. So right there may be some time for questions, right? But just kind of these are some of the tough questions that I at revsure and can have seen, right, in running through and in working with different teams to measure the impact of out of home campaigns, right? And sometimes people ask me, Francisco, how do you measure a billboard, right? And the true answer is you don't just measure a billboard, right? You measure the region, you measure the impact, you measure where that lift is occurring because of that action that you took, right? What would have happened if you would have not done that billboard, right? That out of home campaign. That's the difference maker. Is brand spend just a long game we cannot prove? It is a long game, right? With anything, as we get exposed to things, um, it is a long game, but it's a game that is always a necessary part of every marketing team, of every funnel, of every organization that I've ever interacted with. Because to know something creates trust, and knowing something creates that long-term trust that leads to impact. How do other companies measure out of home? I've seen it in different ways, right? There isn't one specific answer because the impact and what we're measuring can be different, right? Where for some it can be a region, for others it can be a city, for others it just can change. And I think the biggest thing is does this work for field marketing and paid social? Absolutely, right. Seeing the pre and post analysis, seeing how spend, seeing how taking an action can, have a lift on pipeline, have a lift on revenue is absolutely applicable to all of your go-to-market motions. Wait, so is there any tough question that I think you've encountered in presenting out of home throughout Glean?
None that we haven't covered here already. I think something that came up in the chat, changing out of home and billboard ads, because we saw, less lift with something that we've done previously. I don't know that that would be the case. I think, because the impact to all of the different metrics that we were looking at, whether it's, web visitors, leads, pipeline generated, et cetera, because those take such a long time to show any impact, it wasn't going to be in a time period where we could, easily pivot a billboard message. Those have to be done months in advance. And so, what we did end up doing though was kind of using our digital channels as a little bit more of a testing ground, because those, the early indicators of, engagement with, a brand ad or a display ad or something like that on digital is a little bit, the kind of lead time for that is a little bit faster. We can, produce digital assets a little bit faster. And so that was kind of the testing ground for us there instead of true out of home.
Thank you. That was great insight. So lessons learned and what is next. And we've talked about so many things today, but these are, if you leave with nothing else today, is start with a unified funnel, right? Bring everything together. Have patience with brand. As we mentioned, it is a long game. Use real measurement, not hope. I think that's one of the biggest things is if you can measure, if you can say there is a statistically significant lift, that's the difference maker, right? And package proof for the people who fund it, right? Your C-suite. So those are some of the biggest lessons that I have learned in working with Wesa and in working with all our customers that I wanted to share with you. And I thank you so much for your time today. I thank Wesa for her time today. And feel free to reach out to any of us. It's been an absolute pleasure to spend my day with you and with Wesa.
Apparently, I was just a white square right there at the end. So here I am. Hey, super insightful. I apologize if I butcher your name, but Jakub, thank you so much for asking the questions. Wesa for answering those questions along the way, and keeping this like really tight and informative. We really appreciate y'all spending time with us. And again, for all of you who are out there watching, please don't hesitate to reach out to Francisco or Wesa is in the community. Although we're all busy marketing ops professionals, we do like to help each other out with some of these more challenging questions and learning vicariously through those that have already done it and through moments like this is what it's all about. And if you haven't yet joined the community, please come do so. We're all there talking shop around all these things all the time, both in the forum and on our Slack chat environment. And so with that, I just want to say thank you again to both of you. And thank you, revsure, for being a really great sponsor of our community at MOPSA 25 and for this particular session. And we're looking forward to working with all of you again in the future. But thanks, everybody, for being here. We're going to sign off and appreciate your time. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.